Hello, Dr. Cath here again, and because it's Easter, we're going to be looking at eggs, birds' eggs, Easter eggs. Eggs have been a symbol of rebirth and fertility for many centuries, long before Christianity. But of course, with the coming of Christianity, they also become a symbol of the resurrection of Christ leaving the tomb on the third day, on Easter Sunday, which is why, of course, we have Easter eggs on Sundays. But today, we're going to look at real ones. So real birds' eggs, they're all starting to breed now. So we'll learn a little bit about the process of egg laying, nesting, and the differences in different kinds of birds' eggs. They're an absolutely fascinating topic. One of my earliest memories of involvement in natural history was when my grandfather lifted me to see into a bullfinch's nest in a blackthorn hedge. And I must have been about 3 or 4 years old. And to see these absolutely beautiful, perfect little eggs sitting in the hairy, the animal hair lined cup in the bush was absolutely wonderful. And of course, with the strict injunction, you can look but don't touch. And it stayed with me all my life. Just that perfect memory, because they are perfect. They're not only beautiful and lovely coloration and markings, but they're also a perfect survival capsule and incubator for the baby egg, the baby chick inside of the egg. Now, obviously, you all know what the inside of a chicken's egg looks like. And on the outside, the bit we see, obviously, is the shell. And the shell of an egg is its protection, but it's also porous. So it also allows air in so the chick doesn't suffocate. The development of eggs with a hard shell, of course, was it was the thing that allowed reptiles to evolve from amphibians. So they didn't have to return to the water to lay their eggs. They could lay their eggs in air. So this allowed the evolution of dinosaurs, which then, of course, evolved into birds. So the hard shell on an egg was the critical thing for allowing life on land. So the shell is porous. So this is a chicken's egg shell, very highly magnified, and looks completely different from the smooth eggshell you'd be used to seeing. If you looked at it very, very closely and have very, very good eyesight, this is what it would look like. And this allows the air to allow the chick to breathe. And as the chick develops, there are blood veins, blood vessels of the chick spread around the inside of the shell, and the air diffuses directly into the blood. The pore pattern varies on eggshells, and the surface of the egg varies according to the lifestyle of the bird. So it's not only a perfect incubator for birds in general, but each species has perfected its own way of protecting eggs against the environment they're in. So these are SEM, scanning electron microscope images of, at the top, a guillemot egg, and at the bottom, a razorbill egg. These are very interesting because a guillemot nests in huge communities on sea cliffs, and they're very close together, and there is no nesting material at all. So they're just on this rather dirty ledge because it's had lots and lots of birds living on it for quite a long time. It's completely covered in guillemot poop. Obviously, it's not a very salubrious place to bring up your eggs, and they have evolved the surface of the egg has these little pimples on it. So all those little blue bits you can see are like little pimples, and it allows the egg to be self-cleaning. When water lands on the egg, it forms a droplet. It doesn't splatter. It stays in a nice droplet, which then runs off the egg and takes the dirt and also the salt spray away from the eggshell. Razorbill eggs they have individual nests rather than being all crammed together on a cliff ledge, and it's a much cleaner environment. So razorbills, despite the fact they're quite closely related to guillemots, don't have the same surface structure. So this is how birds can have adapted to their own particular way of life. Another interesting one is a hoopoo. Hoopoo's are a disgrace. Their nests are really, really squalid. They've got no idea about cleaning their nest, keeping it tidy. Their eggs have hollows in them that the brooding female fills with a solution, a little oily solution from the preen gland above its tail, and this has antimicrobial properties. So she coats her egg basically in a antibacterial coating, so that when she leaves her egg, she actually will defecate, particularly unpleasant, smelly, noxious kind of poop all over the eggs to stop them being predated. And the antimicrobial properties of the preen gland solution she's put on the egg stops them getting infected with anything too horrible. So basically, if you're bringing up your eggs in squalor, it's a very good way to protect them. And ducks' eggs and things have an oily outer coating, a cuticle on them that keeps them waterproof and still allows them to breathe. It's like a bit like Gore-Tex covering. So each species has a different way of dealing with this. The white of the egg is not only provides water to the growing chick, but it's also an antibacterial layer. As the chick grows, the white will shrink and the air cell also grows. So the egg loses quite a lot of water during its development and becomes lighter. The yolk will be food for the chick. It's full of protein, and the germinal disc there you can see, this is the newly laid egg. This is the group of cells that will actually develop into the baby chick, and it feeds on the yolk all the time it's in the egg. The size of the yolk, rather, it depends on what kind of chick is developing. So bigger yolks, you end up with a more developed chick hatching out. So on the top left here are baby great tits newly hatched. As you can see, they're pretty embryonic, really. Rather ugly little beasts. The eyes aren't open and they are dependent on their parents for everything. So tiny birds like this, the yolk only constitutes about 20% of the egg. Chickens' eggs, ordinary hens' eggs like we eat, are around 30% yolk, and waders' eggs are similar, and they give birth, they hatch into what they call precocial young, like these little curlews here, the little fluffy, able to run about, able to peck for food and see and call to their parents and all that sort of thing. At the top end of the scale are things like kiwis and megapodes. This is a Maui Fowl chick on the bottom left here, and when they hatch, they're pretty well ready to go. They don't need much parental care at all. So 70% yolk, and you end up with an almost fully formed bird. It's a bit smaller than the adults, but megapodes hatch. They can fly, they can run, they can hunt for themselves, and the same with kiwis. Tremendously wide range of colour in birds' eggs. I mean, if you look at a collection of them, you can be amazed by the different tones of them. But in fact, there are only two pigments present in birds' eggs. These are the blue-green pigment called biliverdin, and a red pigment that gives the red-brown colours, which is called protoporphyrin. It's a bit of a mouthful. You don't really need to know the name, but it's why you don't really get bright yellow eggs. You know, you get greeny, very pale green, leafy green, but it has to be from those two colours. So the colour and pattern of the egg can be for several reasons, and one of the most obvious is camouflage. In birds that lay on the ground, in open situations without much of a nest, like these ringed plovers here, they're actually very, very hard to spot amongst gravel. Gravel and sandy areas where these birds habitually lay their eggs. So very effective camouflage, and because they're not a solid colour, it's very difficult to pick them out. It makes them hard for predators to get at. Curlews have these marvellous speckled browny, sometimes olivey green eggs that fit with the background. And of course, these birds also tend to nest in fairly loose colonies. They like to nest fairly near to other members of the same species, which also protects them because there are more adult birds around to chase off predators. In some birds, it's obvious it's not camouflage at all. I mean, these are about the most uncamouflaged eggs you could possibly see. These are from great tinamous, and they nest on the forest floor. And they have brightly coloured eggs, depending on the species, different colours, and very glossy eggs. And it's thought that these are actually an invitation to other birds to lay in the same nest. So having the brightly coloured eggs isn't to protect them against predation, it's to encourage more birds to join together to lay eggs. And in that case, you hope that if something comes and predates the eggs, the one that gets taken isn't yours, it's somebody else's. So it's quite a good way of avoiding predation of your particular egg. Guillemot eggs here are absolutely amazing. They're incredibly variable. The same species of bird can lay all sorts of different colours and patterns of egg. Each individual guillemot has her own pattern, and she will lay the same patterned egg every time she lays an egg during her life. So she memorizes her egg pattern when it's laid. She has a good look at it, memorizes it, and then she knows which egg is hers when she comes back to the nesting cliff. And remember, these are the ones that are there on the nesting cliff, ranged along, very close together, like books on a bookshelf. So it's like goes guillemot, 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 all along the cliff. When she comes back to the cliff, the male comes back to the cliff, they have to know which is their egg. And they can recognize their own. And this was proved by an experiment that the egg was moved a little to one side or to the other side, or shifted a little bit on the cliff. The bird recognizes their own egg. So if they all get driven off by a predator coming along or something, they know which one to come back to. It's also important to be able to recognize your eggs if you're a species that is regularly parasitized by a brood parasite, like a cuckoo. And this doesn't always work. This is a dunnoc's nest with a cuckoo's egg, and you'd think that that dunnock would spot that immediately. But in actual fact, they're not really terribly good at it. Quite a lot of species can pick out brood parasite eggs. it's not only cuckoos that do it. These are Zambian finches and weaver birds, which are used as hosts by the cuckoo finches, which are a parasitic species. Each column of this shows a different species of bird, and it's almost like an arms race. The species that is parasitized changes its egg pattern, its egg color, in a hope that it will make it more obvious when a brood parasite has been in, and then the brood parasite alters the color of its egg to match up with it. So this is an ongoing thing. And this is another interesting thing. This is again with the brood parasites. This is a Prinia egg. It is a type of weaver bird on the left, and the parasitic weaver bird on the right that uses its the Prinias as foster parents. And as you can see, the Prinia has this wonderful squiggling sort of scribe pattern on top of the blotches, which the parasitic weaver can't achieve. So this means that the Prinias can actually pick out parasitic weaver eggs. They don't always. Obviously, parasitism still works for the parasitic weaver, because otherwise it'd have died out by now. But they can't do that fine scribbling thing with the egg that the Prinias do. But adds an extra dimension. This is amazing how birds can evolve these defenses. The previous slide we saw with all the Zambian finches on it, it doesn't take them decades to do it. They can change in relatively few generations. So always ongoing adaptation. Eggs can also offer protection against the color of the egg against UV light and heat. So ostrich eggs are white because they don't absorb as much heat. Obviously, they're in a very, very warm place. Blue eggs allow less transit of ultraviolet light, which can be dangerous, as we know from having to wear our sunglasses and our sunscreens. So it's a balance. Darker coloured eggs heat up more quickly. So in a very warm situation, they could be at risk of overheating, which could be more dangerous to them than the ultraviolet light would be. So it's a balance. It's always a balance. And the colour can also show the quality of the female. Brighter coloured eggs are more likely to be produced by a bird that is well nourished and healthy. So it acts almost as a blackmail. It encourages brightly coloured eggs, encourage the male to make more effort. If they think that their eggs are more likely predated, they're more inclined to bring more food to the female so that she doesn't have to leave the nest so much, and to take their turn brooding. But they also know that their mate is a good quality female, and the chances are that the chicks are going to be healthy, so it's worth making that effort. So the shape of eggs now. This is the guillemot again. As you can see, it's living in a pretty mucky place. And it was always thought that this incredibly elongated, what they call a pear-shaped egg, very pointed at one end, stopped the egg rolling off the cliff. And the thought behind this was that if you gave it a tap, it rolled around the point rather than rolling sideways. In actual fact, it doesn't really work very well. And it looks like the experiments they did with them were done with blown eggs. So they're very light. And the movement, when in that situation, you put them on top of, on a table or something, you've got a blown egg, it will go around in a circle. But of course, they're not on a flat place. And the egg the weight of the egg varies according to the stage of development. So that didn't really work very well. Other birds that lay these very pointed eggs, and all the waders do, they almost always lay 4, so they fit together in a nice little group, and this allows the bird to brood them more easily. It's more surface available to be in contact with the mother bird, so brooding is more effective. So that's one reason for having these nice pointed eggs. You've got them fitted together. Of course, all birds have brood patches. They lose the feathers, this little great tit here, lose the feathers on their underside, so their skin is in contact with the egg and it's warming it efficiently. And of course, great tits have quite a big brood of very small eggs, and they have a big brood patch so they can really nestle down onto them and all the eggs get nice and warm. But again, the fitting together neatly thing, it doesn't necessarily show us why they were that shape. It obviously helps. Recent research has given the idea that it's more to do with the way that birds fly, and the birds that lay more pointed eggs tend to be faster flying birds. So that things that fly quite slowly, like owls, for example, have a rounder egg. They don't have to have the pointed shape. It's to do with the shape of the pelvis and all sorts of things. So we don't really know, but there's a lot of experimentation going on with it. The other thing is strength. The rounder an egg is, the stronger it is. It just to do with the qualities of different shapes. These are ostrich eggs. Obviously, an ostrich is a big, heavy bird. Its eggs need to be strong enough to be sat on by an ostrich, or stood on by a tourist in this case. So a nice round egg is strong. But remember that the chick also needs to be able to break out of the egg. That's quite a small creature. So it's a balance again. Whether how strong you need your egg to be, and how weak you can manage with it being to make it easy for the chick to get out. So going with the ostrich eggs, these are of course the biggest eggs in the world. The really big one here is an elephant bird egg. These only became extinct in the last millennia, so the eggs are still available. The smaller one here underneath the hand is an ostrich egg, and the tiny little egg that's being held is a hummingbird egg, which is absolutely minuscule. It's about the size of a jelly bean or a tic tac. However, we've got this absolutely huge egg, ostrich egg, absolutely vast thing. It would take an hour and a half to hard boil it. You could make an omelette for 12 people just with one egg. Compared to the size of a kiwi, though, it's actually pretty small. Sorry, not kiwi, an ostrich, a female ostrich. So she lays a huge egg, but it's only a 60th of the size of an ostrich. The little hummingbird lays 2, but each of her eggs is about a 1/9 of the weight of a hummingbird. So 9 hummingbird eggs makes 1 hummingbird. 60 ostrich eggs makes 1 ostrich. So actually it's pretty small for the size of an ostrich, and the poor little hummingbirds are actually quite big. They're tiny little birds. They only lay 2 eggs, and they make these little nests that are about the size of maybe about a ping pong ball size. There's one is with a hatched chick and an egg nestled into its tiny little nest. It would need 240 eggs to make an omelette for just one person. So it's a good job we don't eat them, because that's an awful lot of hummingbirds. This is the bird that has the biggest egg for the size of the bird. This is a Kiwi skeleton, and their eggs are simply enormous. Of course, the shape of a bird's pelvis means that they're not restricted in size in the way mammals are. Obviously, if you are a mammal, you give birth to your young, it has to go through the gap in the pelvis. So it can only be so big or it gets stuck. Birds don't have that problem. Technically, they could lay an egg as big as the kiwis is. It is an absolutely huge egg. It's 25% of the mother's body weight. It's a flightless bird, so it doesn't have the problem of having to fly with a developed egg inside it. But that's a huge thing to push out. Like kiwis have their feet a long way apart and their eyes water a lot. Most birds lay their eggs in early morning, so they're not having to get about and fly while they're carrying a fully developed egg. So kiwis are thought to have eggs this big because they actually have evolved from being a much larger bird. They're part of the same sort of family as the emus and things. And the thought is that they were very much bigger, and the size of the egg hasn't decreased as the size of the bird has. So this is the one with the enormous egg. The nest helps a lot with the incubation. This is a nice cozy nest. This is an eider nest. When the mother eider is the only one that does the incubation, the male doesn't. Remember, he's brightly coloured, he's black and white. She's the sort of mottled brown job. And when she leaves the eggs, she'll cover them with the down that she plucked from her own breast. And this is the eider down you have in your body warmer or your pillows and duvets and things, lovely and snug. So that helps keep them warm. Long-tailed tits have these wonderful enclosed nests that are all full of lined with feathers and made out of lichens and spider webs, and they're actually quite stretchy. So they have up to 10 young, and as the young grow, the nest stretches and changes shape a bit. Fascinating things. And remember, we were saying about the brood patch and how many eggs you can efficiently cover with it. Well, tiny little goldcrest here, they lay about 10 eggs in a little cup-shaped mossy nest hanging from usually from one of the conifer trees, and she can only make bodily contact with 2 or 3 of the eggs. So how does she keep them warm? Well, they've got a cunning trick. The goldcrest can heat up its legs, so it puts more blood into its legs to heat them up, plunges them in amongst the eggs in its nest. So they work like little immersion heaters, and she sort of paddles them around a bit so that the eggs move around and each one gets warmed by the heat of the incubating goldcrest legs. Now, isn't that absolutely amazing? A great way of raising more eggs without being bigger and without having more brood patches. So she's actually sitting on the nest there, paddling her feet around and pumping blood down in amongst the eggs to warm them up. Completely different way of going about it. These are Maui Fowl, they're one of the megapodes, and they're the one I showed you earlier that have very, very, very precocial chicks. They're the ones that can fly as soon as they're hatched. And this is the little one on the right here, emerging from its nest. And Maui Fowl don't actually brood their eggs. They construct a nest by digging a hollow, filling it with vegetation, which then gets rained on. They lay the eggs on that, and then as it warms up with the decomposition, like your compost heap does, they've covered it over and they've made basically an incubator. The male bird tests the temperature of this with his tongue. They're also known as thermometer birds. So he knows exactly how warm it is for the eggs, and he'll uncover them if it's getting too warm, cover them up more, if it's getting too cold. So they're adjusting their environment to protect their eggs in the best possible way. But absolutely incredible how this variety that you get going on. This is a goldfish nest, fairly typical of the small birds, all the passerines, and they wait until the entire clutch is formed before they start to incubate. This means that all the eggs will hatch simultaneously, fairly simultaneously. The birds like ducks and chickens and waders that have those little fluffy running about chicks, they want all their chicks to emerge at the same time, so they can lead the whole lot off the nest. So even though they lay an egg every day, they don't brood until the whole clutch is complete. Totally opposite are things like the owls, the raptors and herons, which will brood as soon as the first egg is laid. And consequently, you end up with a succession of chicks, each 1 or 2 days older than the last one, which can make a huge difference in the development of a chick. The size of the chick is completely different. And it's an insurance policy. So if they run out of food at some point during the phase that they're feeding the chicks in, I'm afraid the smallest of the lot gets eaten. It becomes lunch. But it works for them. It's better to raise one healthy chick than have all 3 starve. Eagles, this is a bald eagle, they have very much the same policy. Swifts don't really have much of a nest. They tend to nest in tall buildings and things. And because they're insect feeders and they fly vast distances to gather their food, gather their insects, their eggs are adapted to survive for quite long hiatuses in brooding. So if bad weather comes and the parent birds have to, go really quite some distance, quite long distances to find flying insects. If a storm comes in or something, they fly ahead of it, but they can leave their eggs sitting in the nest without being brooded, and then come back later and go back to brooding them, and they will have survived. The chicks will survive. They'll still hatch normally. They just take a bit longer. So another adaptation to that particular bird's needs. So there's all the fascinating different ways that birds cope with breeding and cope with their nesting strategies. Like I say, different according to each species. At this time of year, a little later in the spring, you're quite likely to find bits of eggshell lying on your lawn, in the park or in woodlands or whatever. And you wonder, well, how on earth did that happen? Where did that come from? And the best, you can tell quite easily whether it's an egg that's been hatched and a chick has come out of it, or whether the egg has been stolen and predated by some other creature. So this one on the top left here, a pigeon egg, and this one has been hatched. And it's normal to find the bits of the broken bits around the top are folded inwards. You can see them still joined on with the egg, the inside, the membrane on the inside of the eggshell, and they usually have hatched sort of across the egg, if you like. Usually hatching happens. The chick will break into that air pocket and start to breathe air from that before it closes down the blood supply that's running around the inside of the eggshell, where, if you remember, the pores were bringing the air in. So it starts breathing in that air pocket in the blunt end of the shell, and then it can break out around that. So when they're hatching, they have a little little tooth on their beak, and they peck round the egg. It can take quite a long time. It can take a couple of days for them to hatch properly. The parents don't usually help them at all, and you get a very distinctive eggshell left. And of course, the parent birds are very careful about not leaving visual signs to potential predators. So they carry the eggshells away from the nest and drop them, which is why they might end up in the middle of your lawn or in the middle of the park, or wherever. They just carry them away some distance and drop them. They do this as well with once the chicks have hatched. The droppings from the chicks are wrapped in a sort of gelatin-like substance so that the parent bird can carry them away, keeping the nest clean and avoiding any build-up that's showing predators it's there. Down here on the bottom right is a pair of eggs that have been predated by something, and you can see the pattern of breakage is really quite different. These have probably been predated by some other kind of bird, maybe a crow, or ravens will take them, jackdaws, these sort of things. So it's been pecked into. It's been broken into. Quite a few mammals will take them as well. The mustelids, weasels, squirrels will, pine martens, a lot of different things quite partial to an egg. It's a very good meal for anybody, really. So this is the way they're broken into. So you should be able to tell what it is has left that eggshell on your lawn. Telling the species is a little more difficult, which bird it came from, but there are a lot of pictures available online, books about it. You can usually work out just about what species the eggshell was, but I think it's nice to know that you pick it up and that it isn't something that's been eaten, it's something that's actually hatched, and you've got a baby bird there somewhere. I think it's absolutely, it's an uplifting experience, really. Something has been born in your garden, and here's the proof of it. And it always seems much nicer to me than thinking, well, something that might have been born actually got eaten. So there we are. A lot of fascinating stuff about birds' eggs. Loads of wonderful stuff to read up about it. If you're really interested in them, there is a most fabulous book. It's called The Most Perfect Thing, and it's by Tim Birkhead, and that's what it looks like. It's a paperback book. You can get it from the library, and it's all about birds' eggs. And his main study is guillemots, so there's a lot of stuff about guillemot eggs, but they are particularly interesting. So fair enough. But it's a good read, and it's not a heavy read. It's not full of great long words. I recommend that one if you want to know more about biology and the development, all that sort of thing, of birds' eggs. There's only so much we can cover in these in a short time, and there's so much more about it. So what sort of Easter egg are you going to have? These are the fabulous Fabergé eggs, and how beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, thousands of pounds worth. Perhaps you're just after a nice chocolate egg. Fortnum and Masons have been busy with these, absolutely glorious. But why not make a difference? Instead of having an egg, you could join the Wildlife Trust. For the cost of a packet of Cadbury's mini eggs per week, 2 adults in the family can be members of the Wildlife Trust. The whole family could join for the price of only 2 lint bunnies. So have a think about it. A chocolate egg lasts, in my case, about 5 minutes. Membership of the Wildlife Trust could last for the rest of your life. Have a think about it. give us a hand, join up, and help us keep all those birds out there busy producing eggs and healthy populations all over Shropshire. Wonderful. Thank you very much.